Now, 1 foot off center.
And now it's on, gonna blow your mind.
Rick Maddison here with 1 foot off center. We have Scott Lanigan, Jeff Cox, Ron Mattiussi. Welcome to the big show. I am going to say that 1 foot off center, for those that don't know, is about opinions that are left and right off center, okay? So I'm sure by the end of the program you'll figure out who that is. We have a sponsor, Soil to Sod. If you've ever driven by a place that has beautiful landscaping and looks like a landing strip for angels, Soil to Sod probably did it. They did my landscaping only because I wanted to make my neighbors jealous. Done and done. Cost effective, on time, and Pat, the owner, knows more about plants than anybody should. More than Scott Lanigan, that's for sure.
That's not hard.
Yeah. They're very interested in working for builders to residential, so you can make your landscaping pop, not in a bad way pop, but pop in a good way. On average, then you probably don't want the 5-star Soil to Sod crew, and everyone here needs landscaping.
I'm glad Soil to Sod took on your landscaping, because you'd done it previously, and let's be honest, the neighbors were fleeing.
It was bad.
It was terrible. Ron knows.
Well, I was
the
trying
city
to
knows, Rick.
I was trying to bring housing affordability down. Okay, so go to soiltosod.ca and get a quote for your next 5-star landscaping project. Okay. I want to go around the room because this is a hot topic. Election is coming up. We have a federal election. I know all of you are well versed in this. I want to find out where everyone sits with their vote for the party, and I want to get into leadership, more so the party. Which one represents prosperity for you going forward? I'm going to start with Mr. Jeff Cox.
Lucky me. Lucky you. So if you're going to talk about strictly party, which we can do, then I would want to look at where we're at today. And so if I go back over the past 10 years, GDP has sat arguably stagnant while the U.S. is growing at 15%. That means if you're an electrician and you're in the U.S., your dollar goes 15% further than that of your counterpart in Canada, let alone then factoring in taxes, cost of living, a number of things that are significantly lower if you're doing just the comparison. If I look around this city or any city, and I travel lots for work, there is a crisis on our streets. It's not unique to Canada, but we've had lots of opportunity to fix it. We have a drug epidemic right now that is killing human life. That has been fueled by soft on crime policies over the past decade, very unproven stances on how to treat addiction. I used this analogy last week, like handing out illicit drugs to drug users is like giving sugar to diabetics. Like it's ridiculous. So listen, I mean the policy. Again, we're here. We're in the fight of our lives against what was our greatest ally since World War II. And I look back and go, we didn't have to be here. We could have built pipelines that ran very clean liquefied natural gas to two coasts. But instead, the Liberal Party told Europe and Asia that they weren't interested. We could have done a number of things to ensure that we were not in the situation that we're in today. And that falls on one party, the Liberal Party. So if you want to take the leaders out of it, I have no problems doing that. The reality is the policies of that party it's now been anointed the lost decade of Canada. It's the last 10 years of a party that has been incompetent, and for that reason we are where we are today. Scott brought a point up before we went live about, I don't know who you can believe anymore. And listen, you don't have a stance to say that the Conservatives are going to do it better. But at this point, I don't really have a choice but to say I have to give somebody else a shot. And I do like the policies, especially in the last week, that have been announced. I think there has been some, besides the ones that we know that were, very, very, very at the front about again, carbon tax, which I mean, it was not 2 summers ago that that you had a Liberal MP standing up saying, "Good, go on vacation and let the country burn." It was like, this is insanity. And today, tomorrow, that carbon tax will be gone because of pressure from Canadians. A stance the Conservatives have had for some time. I mean, pick your lane. Again, if I look at the policies they've adopted going into this election, they're plagiarizing their competitor almost word for word. I mean, that's the part that I struggle with. I don't know how a party can do a 180 on so many different topics and pretend that a month ago these were not their stances. And for me, that's the struggle. And that will be right or wrong on what happens moving forward. I can't support a party that for 10 years took the country in one direction and then did a 180 on almost every one of their policies that they said we needed to live and die by, and then today say, yeah, you know what, I don't know what you're talking about, we've been doing that, and off we go under new leadership. And so for me, there's only really one choice.
So past indicative of the future in your eyes?
Well, do you have any else? I mean, what else would you? Well, how else do you measure it, right?
Were you switching the coach out on a team?
Well, yeah, fair enough. But the team is still the team, and this is the thing. When I look at people like Stephen Gobert, who to me has been single-handedly one of the worst things that's ever happened to this country, he's still on the team, and he still has a vendetta against Alberta, and he still has a vendetta against the West. I mean. But that list goes on and on. Chrystia Freeland couldn't balance the books to save her life, and she's still on the team. Melanie Joly not doing a lot from at least when I look at her, I go, sorry. When did Israel not become an ally? Like I start to look at some of the things that they talk about, and I go, when did this shift? Those people are still all on the team, and for me, you change the coach. I just don't see a path forward where that group takes a different stance. I think they're trying to get elected, and then I think we're going to go back to exactly where we started.
Okay.
So obviously Jeff's Green Party.
I was going to say.
Okay, that's what I was picking up.
Is it two steps off right?
I guess I have I think one of the things that kind of comes to my mind, and one of the Achilles heel in Canadian politics recently has just been a lack of a majority government. And to me, many have said it's been a two-party race for years. Unfortunately, in the last few years, that's not been the case because there has been an alternate contributing factor, which is a non-majority government. And I think until recently, many people thought, well, it's probably going to be a majority government, perhaps the other way, as you would lean, Jeff. But I guess I go, is that reality now in our present climate, knowing the tariffs and how much things have changed, including the party leader adjustment for the Liberals? So now, can we only think of it exclusively as a two-party race, or is it actually going to be critical how many votes the other two minority parties, if you will, are going to get?
Well, what I'm interested in is which party does God like?
All of them, Rick.
Okay. Ron, what's your thoughts on this? Because obviously this is 1 foot off center, so we can't all agree with Jeff. I mean, that's just, there's no point in having a show.
No.
So where would you fit with what Jeff just said about our legacy of 9 years under Mr. Trudeau?
Quite frankly, Justin Trudeau was never my favorite, and never was. I mean, I voted for just about every party at various points in my life. I sometimes vote for the local candidate. I sometimes look at the broader party objectives. But that's become, to me, quite frankly, a little easier. I think we're at a time of national crisis. I think we're at a time where the threat is real. Nobody's making up that Trump wants to make us the 51st state. And as many times as people say, oh, it's bargaining, it doesn't seem to be bargaining. It seems to be something in the back of that reptilian mind wants to be Putin, and we're Ukraine for him. And I think that's very real. So I think you're starting to see some of the, this isn't about, liberal versus conservative. I don't see that this way. And so, yeah, can I look back and did I agree with everything the Trudeau government did? Not at all. Not at all. But I do think it's a new day. I'm also, quite frankly, and put it right on the table, there was nothing that Poilievre has said in the last number of years that made me warm and fuzzy. I support a woman's right to choose. 34 of his MPs don't. There's some basic aspects beyond treatment of Alberta, and I'll absolutely agree with my friend Jeff. Have there been some things there over the years where Alberta has not been treated fairly? Absolutely. Pipelines. I mean, we live in BC. We saw Trudeau ram a pipeline to the coast to help Alberta. Not that he got any credit for it. Yes, it's over budget, but he did it at great political loss to himself. Harper couldn't do that. He didn't have the guts to do that. He knew that it would be big trouble. So let's as we start putting things on the table, and there's good and bad on both sides that have happened. I worry about democracy. I worry about the fact that Poilievre is giving coffee and donuts to the truckers. We're funded by MAGA. I mean, they weren't truckers. They weren't even anti-vaxxers. I'm not sure what they were. And I just look at what's happening in the United States, and I just think that it's enough memes, enough. To me, given what's happening, all I'm seeing roll out is more, negative ads, negative attack ads. Like, give me a break. Mm-hmm. When Doug Ford realizes this is everybody's at stake here, and starts working, with, in this case, Carney. Yeah, I think it's important. So, do I support them? Yeah, because it's not about those old line liberal conservative. It's about Canada right now, and I say, yeah, let's go get it. We're in a time of crisis. I think he's far more qualified. Talk about leaders. It's hard to separate them. I think he's far more qualified to deal with the problem we have today. Probably be a minority government. He doesn't do a good job. Call another election.
Okay. Now, I know you're bound by the rules of the fact that you were the of God.
Sorry, get easy on it.
And sermons and what have you. So I don't want to, but do you want to add in like one side or the other? Do you want to add to this?
Thank you so much, Rick, for that lovely introduction. I actually really do believe, for myself and for many Canadians, that the standard of living is one of those pieces that is so poignant in today's election cycle of going, who is going to be the leader or party, if you will, that's going to help me afford to live better in Canada, afford to live better at home, get more money in my pocket, and create the security that I'm feeling right now in this midst of insecurity, as Ron just mentioned. I'm feeling the pressure from the States. I don't know what's true or not true. I want to have somebody who's confident and has the backing of a party that can go and negotiate and challenge and have the intellect to make sure that they are curious at what the reality of the threat is, as well as curious about what possible solutions there are. And I think in our political landscape in Canada, we've lost the element of curiosity and nuance. And we've gotten so much more rhetoric from both sides, and more attacking than we have actually intelligence towards some viable solutions. Because I think each party offers an element of a solution that actually can make a difference. And I just think a leader needs to be courageous enough to go, hey, I appreciate Ron saying, hey, I'm liberal, but there's been some things I didn't like and some things I did like. And to me, that's the type of perspective that's going to get us to a better country and more prosperous in the years to come. I don't see any leader right now that's actually taking that position to go, yeah, I think I want to do this together. I see them saying, hey, our way's better because of 10 years of this, or our way's better because we've had 10 years of that, whatever it is. And then, we have other parties in Canada that aren't the two major ones that are trying to put their hand up knowing it's defeatist. And to me, that's really unfortunate, because I think they both offer some intelligence, but not necessarily holistically, but individually. And so if for centrist, there you go, my friend.
Okay, so one tap is liberal and two taps
Can I do it through blink
is
so nobody-
conservative.
I think good points. So many times in our other podcasts, we sit here sometimes thinking we have opposite views, and once we talk about it, we're actually a lot closer. And I think that's a great point. It's just too bad. We can't have more of that, right? More of that. Let's solve this problem right now, rather than pointing out everything different and wrong.
Yeah, and if we're totally pragmatic about it, Ron, like, this is the funnier part to me is we just backed up Ipsos poll that statistically says that you are taking your approach for the exact reasons you stated, and my demographic is doing like so. If you actually dive into it, that's what Ipsos said. And listen, I get painted as a conservative. The reality is I've coin flipped to this point in my life as well. Like, and again, I'm with you. Like, you are correct. There are extremists within the Conservative Party that go, guys, you got to figure out how to leave that behind. But but those same extremists exist on the other side. And you're right. I'm not. I mean, we have not had a leader in this country in some time. I mean, actually, it would be Justin Trudeau in 2015. That was the last time the country was enamored by a leader, and that lasted about 6 months.
Right.
And then everything went to hell. And it's time for that. It's time for a leader like that. The only, like in recent memory, the one I can think of is when Barack Obama came in. I mean, that was a time of change and a time of hope. Whether again, this is this extremist of whether you're Democrat or Republican, it's irrelevant. I'm talking about somebody that stops towing the lines, party lines, and says we're going to do things differently. We are in need of that person. Do I sincerely believe that is Pierre? No, because I see the divide. I'm like, hey, you haven't figured out how to win them all over. I don't think it's Mark Carney either, but so for me, I look at this and I go, yeah, I got to look at the last 10 years and go, I don't have a choice. I got to put them in the penalty box.
Yeah. Okay, so
Mr. Maddison.
Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Right, and. I think for me, it's because of there's a lot of the same cast of characters in the same seats, further to Jeff's point. And when I sat down with Pierre Poilievre and sat across from him off camera, I said, there's 3 reasons why I think you'll be prime minister. And he goes, what are those? And I said, 1, you have man-sized hands. He laughed.
That's all.
He says, I don't know what that means, but I don't know. It just... number 2 is, I said, you wrote about the same things that you're talking about today. You wrote a paper way back when. It's well publicized, and less government, less tax. Rings true for me. And number 3 is you have a smoke show for a wife. And I said, she is awesome. And he goes, thank you very much. He goes, I'll tell you that. I'll tell her that tonight. But for me, he, because let's face it, if you have a smoke show for a wife or girlfriend, it's not. It shows well on you.
You just lost the whole demographic.
That's right.
You just lost the whole, and we all agree that you just lost.
Well, that's why I was off camera. That's why I was off camera. But what I'm saying is, just in those moments when I was saying these ridiculous things, he laughed and we had a good moment, and that's what
you really said it.
Oh, I totally said it. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But there's a lot of reports that he's better. He is considered to be a sincere, genuine, great human being from not his own party, from journalists who have arguably left leaning and say, yeah, off camera he's one of the best guys I've ever met, and
he won't talk to us anymore. But
well, and that's been the big question, right? It's like why can't he pull that? Why can't he pull that onto the public stage?
I think he's following a playbook that doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
I would agree.
And that's what's happened. It's worked really well. Let's face it, Justin Trudeau had lots of ways you could attack him, right? His manners, his selfies, there was lots of things that a lot of Canadians, regardless of their political stripe, kind of rubbed them the wrong way. And he took advantage of that, and that worked really, really well. And that playbook, and it was David Frum who said recently, a good Republican / probably conservative, he lived here, and he just said, he's fighting last year's election, and he never shifted to the role of a leader. He never shifted away from the fight, and now it's hurting him because they've taken away some bullets that he had. And this is something I said to you. We left last time. I said, I don't know. Long before the polls, I said, I don't know. Like, my advice to if somebody knew him would, get off that page. You got to turn the page. You got to come back. What are those things that conservatives think are important? What are those things that you're planned for the country? And now you're getting some of that. But I think. I think if he is a nice guy, he should act like it. He's got to see that guy.
So it's important for me. I obviously I value you as a friend, and I value your opinion.
To me again.
No, but for me, what's important to me is understanding. I like to find commonalities. So for me, is there, in your eyes, this, when I say cast of characters, the same people that have voted for these policies, that have voted for these things under Trudeau's leadership, Is there any merit to the fact that we do have to put them, as further to Jeff say, put them in the penalty box because they have been running the country for 10 years and their legacy is not one of prosperity?
Well, let's separate the two. But, I never had a problem with a leader who could admit they took the wrong turn and self-corrected. Ralph Klein's famous line when they asked him why he shifted position, it was on the environment. He said, "Well, that was then. This is now." And,
which is good.
Which is a great line.
You kind of like it when they take a knee on that stuff.
And so I think on that side of it, I guess I just look at it and say, is this the time to do that? It's an election. I mean, I just looked at some of the candidates that are running. Well, there's a whole different team out there of people across the country. Interesting people on both sides, right? We don't know who's going to win. We don't know.
I think you're touching on a couple of things that have not been, that we're not bringing to the forefront yet, and you did touch on it earlier. One, this is still a ground game, and so as it stands today, we looked at it on a federal level. Like, you start to play into who's actually working neighborhoods, and that will play a huge shift into what happens. And again, just to I think it's a reasonable debate, but I don't have a problem when someone says, yeah, I made a mistake and I turned and went the other way. I'm going to find that hard to believe on a guy that has written a book on how carbon tax plays a role in the world and change, that he's just decided to burn that thing today. I mean, to say that, it's not like they made it, like Mark Carney said, okay, we're just going to make a shift. I mean, this guy was a world leader in saying he was going to punish banks that did not get on board. I mean, it's not just a shift for me with him, and that's a little bit of the challenge. And again, now we're into the leadership debate, but the reality is those are things. I look at that, and again, I could coin flip where I voted over the years. It's just I look at that and go, oh, I'm not buying your story, and that's the part that I think I struggle with. I mean, that's a challenge.
Carbon tax put in, Arnold Schwarzenegger, a Republican, put it in California, was taken by Gordon Campbell, hardly a liberal. Right. Although, that's the name of the party.
That was only by name. That was only by name.
That was the name of the party that month. So those policies, whether you like them or not, had some foundation and merit. And, whether or not 20 years later they deem appropriate, whether they're appropriate now, in this day and age, with all that's happening, whether that extra burden on the economy is something we really need in this attempt to, reduce, our energy needs, maybe it was a good thing to do and things are fine. Yeah. But right now, not a great idea.
Not working.
I guess the question we all have burning is how big are Mark Carney's hands? Because I think that's the deciding factor for Rick. Yeah.
Okay, so just because I want to switch gears here a little bit because we are a local podcast, oddly enough. But there's ramifications national that happen locally. So my question is a bit more, speaking of prosperity, if you were to wave a magic wand and be able to build prosperity for the region as well as BC, what things would attract you? And this is going beyond changing the government and policy out, but what things would we wish for our region? Like, what things do you think would help turn it on a dime so that we are able to enjoy some economic prosperity?
Well, I think there's primary prosperity is thought of as in housing affordability in the Okanagan Valley. And I just hired an employee that the interview process came from Alberta, and that was one of the number one questions is what is affordability when it comes here. And I think whatever can bring some of that mentality from a prosperous standpoint into the Okanagan is going to make a tangible difference. And I think there's lots of, we have an incredible tech hub here in Okanagan. The tax incentives and the startup incentives are critical to helping that sector flourish. I think agritourism is another one that I've seen in other regions, especially we have our wine region. And I think if we were to be curious again about how do we elevate that and create more opportunities for that to happen. And then I think one of the big pieces that I've been talking to lately is families that are looking at how do we create more of a community effect, even when it comes to grandparents, parents, and kids living together. And I think some, creative solutions to how do we provide those opportunities, that housing, multifamily housing in our local environment is really important. We have two incredible educational institutes, UBCO and Okanagan College, and from a student incentive impact and bringing students here, there are some policies federally that impacted some of those, that international students.
Don't say that in front of Ron. He doesn't like those policies that rear their ugly heads.
But I think, those type of things, if we can think of ways to springboard off of those assets that we have presently in Kelowna, I think that actually make a ton of difference.
Okay. So, and for you, one of those drivers are UBCO and Okanagan College as far as, continuing to give back to the region sort of thing. Okay. Ron?
Cool. I agree that, the biggest problem when we talked about housing, when I look at what people can do, certainly across the province, if we're going back to it, what will any federal government need to do? And I think it's help fund infrastructure. I think there has to be, both parties talked about reducing fees and stuff. Well, municipalities need the fees to survive and to build pipes and stuff. So if you're going to reduce them, then somebody's got to go back to the old days when the feds or whatever, provided infrastructure grants that was not just once every election, those flurry of grants, but stable programs that say here's what we provide. So I think infrastructure is needed, or the cost get put on. If you're a developer and anything you get, it gets pushed right back to the price of the house, right? So anything you could do to take that pressure off, I think is particularly helpful. So I'd say, let's look at that area in particular. In terms of prosperity, Kelowna's kind of a weird animal, and it's a little harder to pin down. I think we have lots of interesting business. Drive through the industrial park, and you're amazed at all these businesses, these very small businesses that are doing kind of amazing things. So, I've always supported, as a government, when you provide grants or when you provide subsidies, hopefully they're doing the right thing. I think, large multi-million-dollar corporations, if they're getting a subsidy, hopefully there's a reason for it and it's helping. Maybe it's drilling oil where they wouldn't have drilled before, if they didn't have some kind of supplement. But I also think helping entrepreneurs, helping those small businesses. I think small businesses face all the problems that the big businesses have without the resources.
Mm-hmm. Well, and coming out of COVID too, that was a really telling time when big box stores were open. Amazon was doing a flourishing business, Costco, and as a result, a lot of these small, medium-sized businesses suffered immensely. Yeah. And I still don't think a lot of them crawled out of that hole for sure. Mr. Cox.
Yeah, government has a role. We talked about this in the last podcast, and I think Ron had great points. Infrastructure is a good example. You can't be the first builder in to do a subdivision because you're going to go bankrupt. The joke about it used to be that way about golf courses too, and. Yeah. But when you get into the data, I think the reality is we're well funded. So you go through, you can put us against countries around the world. We have the money. That's not our challenge. The challenge is that the money's not getting to the right places, and that really becomes an issue with bureaucracy, and it's at all levels. Municipally, I have to get parking passes because of where I live. It's so complicated now to get a parking pass. I literally have to take my first child down there to fill out the forms. It has gotten to the point where it's insanity. Yeah. You're laughing, but it's
no.
Like last time I tried to get parking passes, I was just like, we have lost our way. How could I not? Again, I own the house. Anyway. So there's an example, I think, where just an example locally. Why we have a great wine region. Why are wineries closing? Independent wineries closing because they have been hammered with tax burdens and bureaucracies that they can't meet, and that's the challenge. It always gets painted one way or the other, but the reality is you can't have the BC Liquor Board that imposes significant rules on a family winery that's going to produce 1,000 cases of wine. What happens? They close their doors, and there's proof of that time and time again. I would agree with you. Listen, we should not be giving subsidies to oligopolies, and we have a number of them in Canada. Telecom, airlines. Listen, I have to travel for work all the time. The state, when I am moving to Air Canada as my solution, like we're in trouble. And
so much for that
it's the
sponsorship.
red logo. The red logo really throws them off.
It's liberal. It's kind of liberal.
It does.
But I last week, because I just put my hands in the air as a Westerner and flew Air Canada back to Toronto, and that is like, again, we have no options again because of regulation. Like, that's the stuff that has to get out of the way. I mean, what is the data around healthcare? We have something like 3 administrators to every 1 nurse. Like, who thinks that formula adds up to success? My 3-year-old knows that doesn't add up, and that's the part that we have to make some changes on, and then say, "Well, you just want to line your pockets." It's not true. Like, you're not 99.3% of our economy is based on small to medium-sized business enterprise, right? Mm-hmm. And if you talk to anybody that's in one of those seats today, they are not feeling the love. They are hanging on by their nails. That's a scary place for us to be as a society.
Mm-hmm. There's a great book that just came out, and I agree, and it touches on that. It's Ezra Klein's Abundance,
That's good.
And it's about that. And you know, why do the blue states have a housing crisis and the red states don't? Well, they don't have regulation. They don't have any regulation. Now, maybe that's a little bit much, but when I start saying, part of my job now is going around trying to deal with communities that are not getting any development approved.
Right.
Small towns around, and you go in and as a planner, as my profession, I go back and look, like, what have we done? We got to the point now where we're so busy trying to save everything, nothing moves. It's all saved because nothing moves, right? And so I totally agree with you, Jeff. We've got to start there. Now, I don't want to see an Elon Musk kind of craziness just going in and ripping things apart. But yeah, I think it's time as a society. We want to build houses. We've got to look back at what are some of the regulations we have in place. Why are they there? What are they protecting? Is that more important than housing? So I think it's time.
Critical. Sorry, just for critical. Just brought it around me that
We're tag teaming you.
I know, I got it.
So there's a Ontario has the Ring of Fire, which is set to be one of the great mineral explorations left in Canada, and again, Indigenous groups on board, governments on board. The reality is, it came to a screaming halt because of moss of all things. To my knowledge, not a unique moss. Not something.
Kate Moss.
Not something that's going. And I think that's our challenge, right? Is we could have been developing that now for the better part of 20 years, but it hit a wall and then just gets set aside. And today we're talking about reviving it because we're again under attack. But what happened? And we just have to be very, very careful not to get there again. That's a lesson my generation has to learn, is that this gets passed down, that you can go too far one way.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Lanigan, do you want to clean up hitter here?
Well, I'm right in there. Yeah, I think exactly what you're saying. The bureaucracy is one of the biggest inhibitors and that's not, everybody already has stated that, but I think when you start legislating or specializing in whether it's special interest groups or morality and those type of things, you start getting into where a lack of freedom and a lack of movement happens collectively. And I think that makes so much sense. Like the Moss thing makes and it's almost fearful to say it's ridiculous in our day and age for some of these things. And I think that's what people have lost the ability to say sometimes. This is a little bit ridiculous. And so when somebody finally says it's ridiculous, they can't just leave it there. They have to provide solutions. And I think that's where, back to our original conversation on the federal level is there's been a lot of that's ridiculous, so that's crazy, but then I want viable solutions that actually are going to change the narrative and actually make it more, we're like, hey, okay, this actually makes sense, it's logical, it's not so influenced by all these factors that I'm trying to appease people, rather it makes the most sense. And I don't think our generation, multi-generations, we don't like discomfort. We're consumer based, and so we want it now and we want it quickly, and we've lost the ability to kind of see the long game, and I think that's really inhibited us in Canada and in the Okanagan and in our province, because we feel like I want the immediate solution now, I want money now. And it's kind of like over the past couple of years you had like, hey, we're going to give $100 grocery credit to everybody, and that's
it was 1,000 I think in BC.
Was it?
Yeah.
And I'm like, great, but it makes no difference really for anybody. I want the long solution, and to me, that's the piece that, regardless of what we're talking about here, I
so you
want
want less taxes? Is that what you want?
Is that lean towards one political party?
No, I'm just asking for a friend.
Smaller government, less taxes. Hey, Rick?
Yeah.
Wonder who that is. Oh, the friend that you met with a couple times. That's right.
Well, it is interesting, the Ring of Fire and the Moss thing, because we had a milfoil issue here because they couldn't harvest the milfoil because of the fact that there was a shell or something that was found that was, one of those ridgeback shell fragments that was found in the beach. So they didn't want to do harvesting of milfoil because they wanted to protect that region. And we have tourists coming in who don't like milfoil, and that was another issue that we stopped, paused it for a long time, and we did get it back. But yeah, that sometimes there's these greater causes that I'm not sure about.
Well, that's because we know where you are in the whole spectrum.
Oh my! I'm just going to leave that. Okay, so I think we're going to close this off, but want to thank you, Scott Lanigan, Jeff Cox, Ron Mattiussi. 1 Foot Off Center, sponsored by our good friends at Soil to Sod. Any landscaping, okay? Any landscaping.
I'm on
Who
it.
do you go to?
Soil and Sod. Why would I not go there?
Soil to Sod.
I want the angel's wings in my backyard.
And they don't sell the sod. They get a lot of calls for that, which is weird. Anyway, thanks again for watching, listening, and we'll be back.